I remember so distinctly this time. I knew what I was wearing. I know where I was standing in the room. And this person who I was married to at the time, whom I loved, we were having some words, and he basically said, "You're never going to be successful in the competitive cheerleading and dance industry. This business that you're running, you're never going to be successful at that."
It obviously must have been a very painful and scary thing for you to say, I'm not going to stay stuck in my disability, in this terrible circumstance of a divorce that I'm going through, or whatever it was.
But something happened last year that kind of a reality check. My daughter was visiting, kids come with me, and now they're adults. They came to me, and my daughter in particular said, after we had a very successful event, we had filled up Wembley Arena, for crying out loud. She goes, "Mom, I hope you stop and stand back and realize what you've done, where you came from, and how far you've come."
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Legacy Just Believe.
You're standing there with a microphone in your hand, which allows you to speak the message and shine the light that you have always wanted to shine through a sport that you love, through the very sport that someone doubted you with and said, you will never be successful. You are literally looking around at tens of thousands of people upon us and having these conversations, and literally lights and smiling faces looking up at you or down from the bleachers or the tiered seating. In that moment, do you feel a component of, I used that for fuel, I told you so, and here's where we are? Do you feel vindication in any way, shape, or form? Have you let that go so much, you just feel like you're in your natural space or somewhere in between? The ducks are never going to be in a row. And I don't know where that came from or who made it up, but it is totally not real. Totally
I call them
not real.
stuck ducks. I call them stuck ducks.
Yes.
The ducks that are not in a row are keeping you stuck. The ducks that are making you ask permission to live the life that you're proud of.
Yeah.
So I would love to have a conversation today about getting unstuck, about no longer living small, but living big, becoming who you are. And especially as women, we are always trying to get the ducks in a row. And so nothing ever happens to get the ducks in a row. It's just not going to happen. And I want to live the bigger life that does not wait for permission of stuck ducks.
We are not about stuck ducks. We are about owning our lives, owning our gifts and talents, using them to make our difference and our mark in the world, and taking up space. Like, that is what L3 is all about. And I think, Andrea, we see this example in so many women where they've come from that place where they were stuck, and now you look at them and you just go, wow, that is a woman using her talent. That is a woman shining a light. That is a woman making a difference in the world. That is a woman who is genuinely happy and proud of where she is in this very moment, and every day she is living her best life.
Yeah, but even that, what you just said, is very painful to hear for the people who are not yet there. It's very painful when you can barely get out of bed in the morning because something is a crisis in your life, or you're super overwhelmed, or whatever's happening in your life. It's really like tempting to switch off the podcast because this is going to be a bunch of people being successful and I'm not going to be in that crowd. It gets overwhelming.
Rainbows, butterflies, woo! But I'm glad you actually brought this up, Andrea, because you're actually a really good example of, you have had moments in your life, like we all have, but I'm thinking of yours in particular right now, where it has been extremely painful and it seemed impossible to get unstuck.
Getting unstuck wasn't even on my radar some days because, and I think you're talking in context of, my life with a disability is one thing. I'm severely visually impaired. And then I went through an extremely difficult divorce situation and all kinds of things that went along with that, and losing the business, losing the marriage, all of the things. It wasn't even about getting unstuck. It was about literally getting out of bed and putting one foot in front of the other. There were days where that was the biggest deal. That's a place I can definitely relate to.
And I think so. And a lot of us can in our own various stories. But I think what's interesting about you right now, Andrea, is I think it's very easy for someone to look at this version of you, this version of where you are in your life, and go, wow, that's amazing. You're filling these giant arenas with thousands and thousands of people over an ocean, and you have this really successful entrepreneurial career, and wow, you're brave enough to start a podcast and with 0 followers, and you don't even know how to do it yet, but you're going to try and figure it out. Like, all of these things that didn't exist in that version of you that you're describing, that painful version of you that you're talking about. These things exist because at some point in your life, you decided, this is not what I want for my life. This is not what I want to model for my kids. This is not where I want to stay stuck, even though these are the circumstances that were dealt, the card the hand that I hold. Even though that you were in that moment at that time, there had to have been something in you that said, I'm going to play bigger than this. I was meant for more than this. I deserve more than this. But when you're feeling so stuck, was there a time where you all of a sudden, was it like an all of a sudden, I'm going to draw a line in the sand and go big? Was it a very gradual thing? It obviously must have been a very painful and scary thing for you to say, I'm not going to stay stuck in my disability, in this terrible circumstance of a divorce that I'm going through, or whatever it was. What was your mindset, and how did you, for lack of a better term, get unstuck from those painful moments that you are talking about right now, when you couldn't get out of bed, when you were struggling?
It was a slow process. I'd like to tell you I drew a line in the sand. I've had enough. I'm done. And this is it. That was not my path. Congratulations if that was your path. It was not my path. For me, I found myself in a situation where I was in crisis with a difficult divorce, getting out of, and my job was to survive and help the kids survive and become healed people. And I think for that part of the journey, it would have been enough. But also in the process of that, it was kind of a forced sale of a company that I had that I didn't want to get out of, that ended up being kind of like kick you while you're down situation. And so there were multiple losses happening at the same time, with the loss of the marriage, the loss of the business, the loss of income, because I immediately had nothing left. So there were a whole lot of emotional, physical, financial things that were happening all at once, and there were 0 answers. So at that point, I really was struggling to get out of bed in the morning. But I knew I had children, and I knew they relied on me, and I knew they deserved more. And I knew somewhere, I couldn't see it then, but somewhere in the depths of where I was at that time, I deserved more. And so the way I took this path to figure this out was a really long journey, but it was one that became so ingrained in me over time that it remains the fuel today. But here's the number one thing I'll say about it. Deciding you are worthy and deciding you deserve greatness, abundance, love, respect, kindness, joy, all of the things and successes that you define for you. The way you figure out that you deserve that is one day at a time, one moment at a time, because I made decisions every day back then. And to this day, I continue to make those decisions, even though I'm in a much different chapter of my life now, where it's definitely rainbows and sunshine now compared to what it was then. And I have a successful business, and I get to work with family, and I have wonderful love in my life, and the children are grown and happy and successful. That's great, but I'm still every day making that conscious decision that I deserve these things. I work very hard for them, and I want to create that not just for myself, but for everyone else in my sphere of oxygen. And that is something that is such a gift to be able to do now. And it's my encouragement to anyone who right now is having trouble getting out of bed or they have some crisis in their life, whatever that looks like, because we all have that. My encouragement is that it's easy to hear on the internet the kind of that toxic positivity that is really frustrating to hear sometimes, because it'll say like, the rain showers don't last forever. And you see all these posts, and I think they're amazing and they're good fuel. But when you can't figure out how to get to the storm doesn't last forever, it can also be painful and frustrating to hear that. So it really becomes, how do we break this down one day at a time and get a little small win and then another small win? And at that time, my win was get out of bed, make the kids breakfast, have a happy time together in the morning, and get them off to school and bring joy to their lives. And I really needed to bring, compassion and stability and hope for them. And every time I was able to do a little version of that and keep them feeling comfortable and consistent and safe in their world, that was a win to me. And the more I gave that to them, the more it allowed me to see that it was available for me too. So there were definitely no ducks in a row on that chapter of life, and they're still not in a row. You should see the stack of laundry I have in my house right now. It starts with knowing that you're tired of where it is just enough to do something that moves the needle forward.
So when you were going through all of this, did you see the circumstances that you got thrown into? Did you see that coming, or was it just completely out of the blue? And what do you say to the person who is in that situation now, surprise or not, who is struggling to understand what you're talking about right now, in that they do deserve the greatness? They are worthy of love and kindness and abundance and joy.
I think for many people, I was like many people, in terms of the marriage, I knew the writing had been on the wall for a long time, and we had tried all the stuff, and all of those things were happening. I remember so distinctly this time. I knew what I was wearing. I know where I was standing in the room. And this person who I was married to at the time, whom I loved, we were having some words, and he basically said, you're never going to be successful in the competitive cheerleading and dance industry, this business that you're running. You're never going to be successful at that. And I took it in the face. It knocked the wind out of me, but it was a light bulb for me as well. I knew that it was going to be really impossible to save a marriage under those circumstances after all the other context that we had been through. And I knew that I needed to be in an environment where people believe in me and people support me. And I knew that was a little bit of, that was my first hint that, hey, I can actually create a toolbox here. I can create people around me and some skills that I can learn. And that's really how I began to track it, because it felt so bad to be where I was that I wanted to do anything I had to get out of that feeling.
I think it speaks very much to the fact that you're doing what you do now, because even though when he said you will never be successful in this particular arena that was meaningful to you, that you were passionate about in a sport to make a difference in the lives of all these young women, when he issued this statement, you will never be successful, it didn't matter what came after that. It just was him not believing in you. And even though that one statement didn't cause the ultimate demise of the marriage, it was a huge linchpin, and it was a huge moment that to this day drives the mission behind what we do now. Because to understand and to live the doubt that someone has in you, the ability for someone who you love to question that, or make you question that for just a moment, or maybe for a long time. The bottom line is you were not worthy of the impact that you currently make because he gave you permission. You weren't worthy because a number of likes or followers or the outside world gave that to you. We as women are all worthy of greatness and love and meaning and joy in our life because we were born that way.
You have to think about it this way, Aly. The situation that I got told, you're not going to be successful, that's what the world tells women all the time. So I am not unique in this situation. And I'm not asking really for sympathy at this stage because I think everyone in their own way experiences the doubters. You know, the word haters on the internet happens because that's what the world is. So I think it's really important, number one, to recognize we all have a version of this in our lives. And sometimes some people have more than others, but we all have a version. And there's a few things that have given me some freedom in this process. The first sounds really counterintuitive. It took me a long time to get this to this place, but I've done a lot of work here. So the first thing is you have to forgive and release because it gives you freedom to be in a place. Now, I am not ever saying forgiveness lets anyone off the hook. I'm just saying in your heart, forgiveness is different than acceptance of the behavior. For me, it was freeing to me because until I could forgive, it was holding me back. It was so painful and it was a weight in my own self. So being able to forgive, as much as it sounds weird, especially in our situation, didn't mean anything was okay, or it didn't mean I'm going to go back for further conversation or negotiations on these things. It just meant, oh, wait, I have some agency in how this affects me going forward. And every time that I come across situations in life now, I mean, that's the time I learned it, but people do things all the time in the real world, not necessarily just in a marriage, just in life. People do things that are painful and hurtful to you. And I've gotten a lot better at being able to just say, some components of those situations are not about me. And my tool in the toolbox is name it, deal with it, own it, grieve it, all of the things that you have to process. But also, when you're ready, you can drop that because you can just forgive the situation and remember it's probably not about me anyway. And I probably don't have all the information anyway. So it doesn't really matter. My friend said something mean to me. Well, we don't know what's going on in the friend's life that didn't make her day easy that day. I don't know. So I feel like forgiveness is such an underrated tool. And it's not to excuse any behavior. It's just, it's a data point. When you see things like this happen, it's a data point of where am I in this situation, in this equation? What can I control? What can't I control? And we use those data points to become tools for ourselves to create this journey that we have. I mean, if someone wasn't nice to you, you would have a data point on that. And you would be like, okay, I can evaluate what's happening here.
I agree. And here's the thing. When someone isn't nice or they do something hurtful, you and I are so big on the component of starting with compassion first, because we are dealing with human beings. And human beings by nature are imperfect, but we are all dealing with something that that other people are not privy to. The stories behind the behavior are unbeknownst to us. And the gift of starting with compassion for whatever it is that brought that person to do something hurtful to you, there's power in that. And there is huge power in forgiving other people. But there is also tremendous power in using that forgiveness where the weight comes off of you, also as a lesson to understand, like, here's where my boundaries are. Here's how I will move forward in a way that protects me with the boundaries to where that pain can't be repeated again.
I think that's the perfect example. What you just said there of using what you're learning from that and creating the boundaries. That is where people can change the meaning of what forgiveness is in their life. They will no longer allow this behavior or this circumstance because they figure it out when they are forgiving what the boundary is. But also it changes that forgiveness. It means forgiveness doesn't mean tolerance. It doesn't mean being a doormat and allowing things to continue in your life. It means a future focused understanding of what you need and deserve in your life. And that's the biggest thing I learned. I need people in my life who can support my work. And that's what I have now. I have someone who deeply believes in my efforts, deeply believes in my mission, is deeply proud of the efforts and the work that I'm doing as an entrepreneur, as a mom, as all of these great things. And so I feel like because I learned in that forgiveness what I needed and what I deserved, I actually now have that in my life because I was able to see it first. And you can't have it if you don't see it and know to ask for it.
So now in our journey together as entrepreneurs and in the version of yourself and our own journey as entrepreneurs who run this business with arenas full of people, and when you and I are standing in the arena and you're standing there with a microphone in your hand, which allows you to speak the message and shine the light that you have always wanted to shine through a sport that you love, through the very sport that someone doubted you with and said you will never be successful. And then you are literally looking around at tens of thousands of people upon us and having these conversations, and literally lights and smiling faces looking up at you or down from the bleachers or the tiered seating. In that moment, do you feel a component of, I use that for fuel, I told you so, and here's where we are? Or do you feel vindication in any way, shape, or form? Or have you let that go so much that you just feel like you're in your natural space or somewhere in between?
I love this question because it's going to bring me to a couple of points. So number one, no, I let that go. There is no version, no thread of thought in my mind that I told you so, or revenge, or any of that. I feel very grateful. The way I learned to deal with my past has freed me from that, because I told you so actually doesn't feel as good as you think it feels. It feels negative. It feels like a draw. Yeah. I think for me, I feel joy, but something happened last year that brought me kind of a reality check. And it was, my daughter was visiting, the kids come with me, and now they're adults, but the kids have come with me to run cheerleading events in the UK for years and years and years, for decades. And they came to me, and my daughter in particular said, after we had a very successful event, we had filled up Wembley Arena, for crying out loud. And she goes, Mom, I hope you stop and stand back and realize what you've done, where you came from, and how far you've come. Because she sees it every once in a while when she's able to visit. So it's kind of like if you're in the moment and you see your child growing up, you don't notice on the daily basis. But she had a big gap of time where she was there, and then there's a certain level of development, and then she came back and witnessed what she witnessed. All these thousands and thousands of people with joy in their hearts and confidence and building trust and teamwork and creating literally leaders for life. And she saw this and was just like, I hope you stop and think about it. And it really, number one, held me accountable. So I was really grateful that she kind of flagged it, because we get busy in our lives and we don't honor who we are. And I think it's really important what she reminded me. I say to anyone who is listening today, don't forget to stop and celebrate your wins. And if you are making massive achievements in your business, stop and recognize what you've done and the people who did it with you, and that gratitude. But also, if you're in crisis right now, recognize that you got out of bed, light a candle and feel joy, or have a delicious cup of tea if that's what brings you joy. Something to celebrate the fact that you are where you are today because you took a step towards getting better. Celebrate every little win, and don't ever lose that habit of recognizing who you are. That's really important. You want to get unstuck, you start lifting other people up, and you start recognizing the small wins that you have in your life to move your own needle forward. Those are two big things that I would say really have come out of this.
Do you feel like there is more power in moving towards what you want instead of moving away from what you don't want? Or should we move more to the sunshine or away from the clouds?
I am, and I don't care. Everyone says I'm such an optimist, but the way to win this one is always to move more towards what you want. When you're running away from what you don't want, you're operating in fear, and you're operating in a restricted mindset and a restricted space, and it takes away the greatness of who you are. So what you really want is to lean into where you want to go. If you want your business to grow a certain way, if you want to develop some friendships better, if you want to create a new house design for yourself, whatever your goal is, you want to learn calligraphy, all of the things, big and small, that's the key. Giant, little, lean in towards what that wish is, because that's your fuel. And when you get a little movement forward towards that wish, it feels good. It doesn't feel good to run away from what you don't want. It feels scary, and it feels overwhelming. It feels like all the ducks are not in a row. Who cares about the ducks? Just move forward towards where you want to be. Put it on a sticky note on your mirror, whatever you got to do.
Hey, if you love this episode of the L3 podcast, share it with your friends. And don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube or wherever you watch your podcasts. So, we talk about always having your ducks in a row and how that's never going to happen. And you just kind of need to move and take action before the ducks are in a row, because they're not going to be in a row. But here's what's really cool about ducks. Whether they're in a row or not, they're not going to be in a row. Here's what's cool about the ducks. When the ducks are swimming, they look either super cute if they're babies, or when they're older, they look beautiful and peaceful as they float across the water. That is what people see on the outside. Underneath the water, underneath the surface, are these little feet that are just, and they're just going, and they're working really, really hard. And it's not always easy. And I think that speaks very much to the work that you do, the life that you're living, the Instagram that you see.
Yeah.
That on the outside, even though it looks beautiful, smooth, and peaceful, none of that lands without a lot of work under the surface. And so my encouragement to our listeners today is to pay attention to where that rings true in your own life, where you see it in the lives of other people, to allow that to be an inspiration for you, especially if you are feeling stuck now, especially if you are wondering, like, how do I stop playing so small? I want to be big. Because you were not intended to be good. You were not intended to be kind of mediocre. You were absolutely intended for greatness. And I don't want a motivational speaker to come out of me. But the truth is I just so firmly believe in the gifts and talents that we all have. And I believe in the responsibility that we all have to use the unique gifts and talents that we each are given, so that at the end of our days, we can truly know that we wasted nothing, and that we lived a life that was intentional. We lived a life that we are proud of. And today is the day, earlier we talked about a line in the sand. Today is the day where there is a line in the sand that says, I'm no longer going to wait for permission to take up space. I am no longer going to wait for permission by anyone to do and be exactly as I was intended to be. I'm done putting everybody else's agendas in front of me, because if I don't put me first, no one else will. That is not an easy lesson for us, especially as women, because our maternal instinct says, I want to nurture and take care of everybody else and put everybody else's needs forward. We cannot serve others. We cannot serve our own mission. We cannot be a light unless we have filled our own cup. And I think that is so important. The sooner that we learn that, the better. I think, Andrea, you are a very good example of doing just that in spite of all of the challenges that got put on your plate. You are a really great example of owning how hard that was, understanding it, naming it, doing the work to heal it, and using that as fuel and leverage to go be the next great thing and to embrace the next season of your life. Even though you didn't have a crystal ball, even though you didn't know what was going to happen, you were willing to go there. And that is the gift that ultimately builds our confidence. It builds our self-worth. And I think those are two of my favorite L3 character traits, because the confidence and the self-worth doesn't happen to us in order to be ready to go for the next thing. And I think that's the mistake we make, trying to wait for permission or wait for the ducks to be in a row.
Everyone's waiting for permission to be that great version of who they are, but no one ever gave you permission to not be great. No one ever gave you permission to stay small. No one ever gave you permission. Like, that's your choice if you want to stay small, but it's also your choice if you want to grow big. And I'm not trying to oversimplify, because again, we've talked about being in crisis, but being the best version of who you are and dreaming the dreams for yourself, and not just one dream, but dream 3 or 4 dreams past that. Make it multiply way bigger than you think is possible, because we don't know what these limits are or should be. I mean, look at us. For crying out loud, we run cheerleading competitions for a living in the United Kingdom, even though we live in Texas. And we started in a sports hall with 33 teams, and then now we fill up Wembley Arena. That's not a dream that we ever started with. That was never the first dream. It was just what happened because we were willing to dream, and then dream again, and then dream again, and make choices. And so every day we make choices. Do we deserve this? Do we want this? Do we care that the ducks are not in a row? Because they're not in a row. And we don't know what's going to happen. We're starting this podcast. This is podcast 11 for us. And it's very vulnerable and very uncomfortable. And we're still trying to figure it out. And everyone's being nice to us and graceful. And then the internet is not nice. So at some point, somebody's going to be not nice. And we just filter what adds value and allows us to continue our mission to lift women up, to empower them, not just with motivational talks, but actual tools so that they can change their lives. And we get to hear those stories of women who went, you said this, or this on a podcast, and that was the day I changed something in my life that became the ripple effect. And it's going to be something different for every single person who watches this podcast. So I love that the uncertainty can be the fuel. I love that the everyday option to choose or not choose. I love that the ducks can be scattered, and that's our opportunity to be creative and just let things relax so that we can honor who we are and give ourselves the time.
How much, Andrea, do you think risk-taking plays a role in this?
I'm a big believer in risk-taking that is backed with some education and some teams with you that can help you mitigate that risk, but you can't have success if you don't take risks. And you and I went into Olympic Park in London and booked a venue when we didn't have a bank account in the United Kingdom. That's a risk, but we did it because we knew we had created tools. We knew had a certain set of wisdom, and when we already knew by then that when we don't have a backup plan, then we tend to do better at making the plan A the best success. And the bottom line is, building the business that we have now has been massively up and down. It looks great on the internet right now. So if you go and see the website of our company, you're going to see these beautiful photos and there's lights and stages and sounds and joyful people. And that's totally legit. That's exactly what happens. But what people don't see is that those images happen in about 18 days out of the year. It's 18 days where we get the photos and all of that. The rest of the year is a grind. We work very, very hard. We work long hours. I know we make time for ourselves and we do all that. That's a different conversation. But people think that what we do is this glamorous and phenomenal job. And there are elements to that. But what they don't ever see or remember is the grind of what it's like to create that, the risk that we are taking to have that. And we continue to this day to take risks, big ones. We made a big decision yesterday, a massive decision yesterday, and another one the week before. It's very risky, but we're doing it with the pure heart and the knowledge that we have a great team and the knowledge that this is what scaling looks like. And so I think even in your smaller decisions in life, there's risk. And I think if you find risk to be something that you embrace and that you can evaluate with a sort of clear mind, evaluate and just know you're not going to know all the answers, and you know that you can troubleshoot. In fact, literally the conversation you and I had yesterday when we were making this big decision, we were talking about it, and finally you go, I think what I'm hearing from you is say yes to this right now, and then we'll figure it out if the parts we have to. And I said, yep, that's the answer. And so we do kind of live our lives that way. We're not silly risk takers. Well, yes, we are. We booked an Olympic venue in London with no bank account. So, but we do it in a capacity that allows for the greatness to come up among the people that we work with, and we give them autonomy to be great at what they're good at. And you and I give each other autonomy. You and I have a lot of different skill sets that play into the business, and we kind of recognize and own what we're good at. And we use that as a tool to, again, mitigate the risk, but embrace the risk. If you don't take any risk, you're just going to be stuck where that is a big duck stuck. Like, you're going to be stuck.
100% agree. So there is the critical component of taking risks. But there's also a component that is both admirable and also unfortunately unique. And something that's really important to both you and I is the concept of how important it is to never allow yourself to be the victim. The victimness that we see in the world so much right now can be so crippling. And you were a good example of the opposite of that, because in a space where you had a lot of leeway and a lot of runway to be able to go, oh yes, poor me, look at all these things that happened to me. You did not choose that path. And I think that speaks very much to the journey that you actually ended up on instead of staying stuck where you were. So talk more about that.
Well, first I want to distinguish that there is a difference between being a real victim, because there are real victims, and being a person who lives with victim mentality. It's two different things. And so, and that also plays into what entitlement looks like. And we're talking a lot about, well, you deserve this greatness. That's not the same thing as being entitled, to where entitled means like there's an element that everyone else deserves to be behind me. Nope. What you deserve is greatness because you're lifting others up while you climb. And in terms of the victim, even if you are a victim in life, a real victim, and those things are hard, the way you approach it, that mentality, the victim mentality is, woe is me, everybody else is out to get me, will never serve your mission to be big, to be unstuck, to be successful and have abundance in your life and have joy and love. It just hinders it. It's the same thing as running away from what you're not wanting to have in your life versus running towards what you do want. I think the victim mentality is important to switch, and it can switch when you have the forgiveness that we talked about earlier. Victim mentality is a controllable piece in your toolbox, but you have to be very on purpose, because it does feel painful. It does feel frustrating. And if you really are a victim, by all means, you deserve the real grief, the real processing, the real work that you have to do to get through it is genuinely real. So I do not ever want to minimize the impact of being an actual victim. But I do want to say that the victim mentality is not your friend. The opposite of that is your friend. The fact that you know that there's something bigger in your life that not only do you desire and need and want, but that also is a tool to lift up others around you in your sphere. So if you are climbing out of the depths because today is hard, or maybe today's mediocre, but it's just a hard day in general, if you can overcome those things, other people watch. So you're lifting them up as you climb. And I think that if you're a person who can master the joy of moving forward a little bit every day and washing away the victim mentality, your life is not only unstuck, but it becomes this ray of sunshine for yourself and for others. And that is such a good way to live your life and celebrate what the L3 character traits are. And it's what L3 looks like. And for us, I hope that was an inspiring conversation for you today, because whatever we all go through is a tool to be better in our own lives and a tool to be better for others. So it makes me happy to hear it. I hope everyone enjoyed today. And until next time, I hope you lead boldly, love deeply, and live your legacy. Thanks for joining us today on the Lead, Love, Legacy podcast.
Remember, lead boldly, love deeply, and live your legacy.
If this episode encouraged you, like and subscribe and share it with someone who needs it.
And join us next time as we continue to build leaders and legacies for life.